everyone, and welcome back to Scum Villain's Self-Saving System, one of the Chinese web novels we've been reading. The one that is currently being aired as a TV show, yay. But we're not going to watch the show today, I think, because it was more fun having 2 episodes to watch last time, so we're going to wait and do it next time, watch 2 episodes. And that'll let us catch up with the story, since the novel's at a slightly slower pace and we're behind the plot of the show. Hello, Billy, Anna, Desiree, Lobsil, Phil, Don Potts, Archosaur Queen. We are on Chapter 6. Quick catch-up for those who maybe haven't been here, don't know what's going on. Scum Villain's Self-Saving System is the story of a man who, reads this novel, and he hates it. It's, like, so bad. He makes so much fun of it. And he ends up accidentally dying while he was writing a angry comment about the book online. He chokes on food, or, like, on a meat bun, I think. And he ends up waking up in the body of the bad guy from the book, who has a terrible fate in the book. And so he's trying to change his fate in the story, trying to change the plot so that his character doesn't die. But there are certain rules he has to follow because of the system, which acts like a computer game where he's allowed to do certain things. He gets points for certain things, a lot of different stuff. And the relationship is focused on him, Shen Qingqiu, is the main character, and his student, Luo Binghe, who is the main character of the novel, the fictional world he's in, and who's one day going to become this powerful demon overlord. And in the original book, he killed Shen Qingqiu. In this one, they fall in love. But that's not going to happen for a long time. We are still on Chapter 6, very early in the story. Hello, Daniel. Welcome. So we are here, Chapter 6, Unfavorable Beginning. They were, last time, journeying via horse and buggy to their first side quest, which was the Skinner, a demon that keeps skinning people and killing them. So they are headed to Shuanghu City to solve the mystery of the Skinner. Having learned his lesson, afterwards Shen Qingqiu spent the rest of the trip stone-faced, until he finally arrived at Shuanghu City without incident. Although this city wasn't large, it could still be considered bustling. After entering, they stayed at the mansion of the city's richest man, also the one who'd facilitated sending someone to Kangchong Mountain Sect to plead for assistance, Old Master Chen. 2 of Old Master Chen's beloved concubines had died horribly at the Skinner demon's hands, so he'd been desperately looking forward to Shen Qingqiu's arrival. He rubbed his beautiful third concubine's small, white, jade-like hands while moaning and groaning to a row of people overflowing with tears. "Immortal masters, you must help us! Nowadays, I dare not let Dier leave my side for a second, for fear that the moment she's careless, she'll be killed by that wretched monster." A strong sense of déjà vu at these NPC-like lines caused Shen Qingqiu's face to twitch. He absolutely didn't enjoy seeing a 60-year-old coot and a young girl in her teens coo at each other before him. Luckily, Shen Qingqiu still had the aura of a lofty master. After half-heartedly meeting with them, he aloofly went to his room, leaving Ming Fan to make small talk with Old Master Chen. Being a master had privileges. No matter how aloof you were, no one would dare say anything. The more aloof, the more respectful gazes surrounded you. Ning Yingying knocked and entered, sweetly asking, "Shizun, Yingying wants to go and walk around the market. Would Shizun like to keep me company?" Speaking truthfully, no man would dislike having a young girl sweetly cajole you. Shen Qingqiu originally had his back facing her, and upon hearing this, half his heart melted. He cleared the other half, glancing back with the air of one passing out exams, the appearance of a cold and detached intellectual, and said blandly, "If Yingying wants to go and walk around, you may ask several Shishongs or Shidis to accompany you. Before confronting the Skinner demon, this master still has things to do." Who'd she ask to keep her company? Could Shen Qingqiu not know? Obviously, she's going to go ask Luo Binghe. Could he not want to go out and play? Previously, he'd been shut inside Qingjing's Peak bamboo house, pretending daily to be an awesome Shizun of the literature and arts, everything he did had to be done blandly. Blandly saying, blandly laughing, blandly practicing the sword, blandly acting cool. Bland to the point he often had the urge to scatter a handful of salt over his head. Fucking annoying. And when he finally got a break with a trip off the mountains, he was still trapped to his room due to the system's reason that the original Shen Qingqiu liked quiet and would not be willing to mix in places with large amounts of people. He didn't even want to pretend to meditate and lay on the bed just pretending to be dead. Before sunset, Ming Fan entered the room to report. Finally, someone came to talk to him, keep him company. Shen Qingqiu couldn't help but want to overflow with tears. All benefits belong to the male lead, all loneliness to the cannon fodder. Accompanying young girls to view colored lanterns, none of that was for him. Ming Fan said, "This disciple has closely examined the corpse." With a solemn expression, he presented the item in his hand. Shen Qingqiu took a closer look. They were 2 stacks of yellow talismans, written with cinnabar. The paper already became a black color akin to necrosis. You used these talismans to test for demonic energy. Ming Fan said, "Shizun's eyes see all. This disciple used the talismans in 2 places, one at the soil near the grave of a woman who'd been buried, the other at a yet-to-be-buried corpse at the coroner's. With even the soil by the grave so saturated with demonic energy, this confirmed the Skinner demon was undoubtedly from the demon race. Finally, he knew what they were confronting." Shen Qingqiu cleared his throat, making the he made right after sound colder. "To dare harm the lives of people within 100 li of Kangchong Mountain. These demonic lowlives came to our doors themselves. They can't blame me for sending disciples to enact justice on behalf of the heavens." Believe him, he really didn't want to say this kind of corny line full of hot air, but he'd be out of character if he didn't. Ming Fan's eyes were full of worship. "Shizun is wise. If Shizun took action, that demon would be taken care of in 1 strike, ridding the people of evil." Looks like this master-disciple pair, since the past had always followed the mold of "you'll rule" and "I'll worship," there was a very joyous cooperation. To tell the truth, from Shen Qingqiu's point of view, he was extremely satisfied with Ming Fan as a disciple. Even though he was a rich young master and spoiled rotten, he didn't dare show even a little of that arrogance before his master, and instead was absolutely obedient and incredibly respectful. A man would never dislike being worshipped by others like a god. The travel preparations, the food and lodging arrangements, all of it had been single-handedly done by Ming Fan. If his IQ didn't inevitably plummet whenever he met the protagonist, transforming into a schoolyard bully capable of any misdeed, he would be a promising young sprout. Hello, folks jumping in. Anna, Lucia, welcome. Let's see. And towards this cannon fodder disciple, who in the end was thrown into an ant pit by Luo Binghe and bitten to death by tens of thousands of ants, as a fellow victim, Shen Qingqiu felt a kind of pity. This trip off the mountain was for the sake of training. Unless as a last resort, this master will not assist you. Ming Fan, as the most senior disciple, you must make careful arrangements, lest you let the demon harm your fellow disciples. Yes, this disciple has already devised a tactical formation, as long as that demon... Ming Fan had yet to finish when a person rushed into the room, interrupting him. Luo Binghe's face was stark white as he yelled, "Shizun!" Shen Qingqiu's heart thumped once, but he feigned an indifferent expression. "What happened for you to shout so loudly in such a panic?" Luo Binghe said, "Ning Yingying Shiji went with this disciple to the city's market earlier in the day. When it became evening, I urged Shiji to return, but she refused, and then somehow she suddenly vanished. This disciple searched the entire street once but couldn't find her, and could only come back to plead Shizun for help." To disappear at this critical moment was certainly no joke. Night had almost fallen. Ming Fan leapt up right away. "Luo Binghe, you..." Shen Qingqiu promptly flicked his sleeves, and the tea bowl on the desk exploded. Not only did it work as a deterrent, it also prevented Ming Fan from digging his grave. He put on an appearance of barely suppressed anger. "Since the matter's already become like this, saying more is pointless. Luo Binghe, you come with me. Ming Fan, take a couple of shidis and ask landlord Chen for assistance, and go look for your shime together." Mingfan gave a hateful look, but responded and hurriedly left. Luo Binghe had his head lowered, not saying a single word. Shen Qingqiu knew this absolutely wasn't his fault, because Ning Yingying's role as a female character wasn't only to be lovable and cute, but to dig her own grave and be a burden. In the original work, a number of twists were caused by her sudden disappearances, blunders, or messes, and was enough for airplanes shooting towards the sky to drag out the plot by more than 100 chapters. For those who are jumping in, airplanes shooting towards the sky is the pseudonym of the writer. Sometimes Shen Qingqiu was rather impressed with Luo Binghe's dauntlessness when accepting new harem members, never refusing anyone, daring to accept even the most troublesome of women, and to do this without being screwed over and killed. He could only say that, as expected, the protagonist's brilliance truly was overwhelmingly cool, awesome, insane, and badass. A normal person definitely couldn't withstand such a thing. Luo Binghe originally thought Shen Qingqiu must have made him stay so he could beat and yell at him, and lowly said, "This entire affair was this disciple's fault. If Shizun wishes to punish, this disciple will neither resent nor regret, and only wishes for Ning Shiji's safe return." Shen Qingqiu thought he looked incredibly pitiful and wanted to pat his head, but as he was obstructed by the system's existence, forcibly held himself back and coldly said, "You come here. Take me to the place where your Shiji vanished." Luo Binghe and Ning Yingying had lost each other in the market's most bustling area. Shen Qingqiu closed his eyes. There was a barely tangible thread of demonic energy. He followed that bit of demonic energy, which seemed like it would fray or snap at any moment. By the time he opened his eyes, Shen Qingqiu found that he was standing at the doors of a rouge shop. Could it be that the murderer was someone from the rouge shop? Was it that easy? However, after entering the shop, the thread of demonic energy snapped, dissipating completely. Perhaps the murderer wasn't hiding in the shop. It was just that they'd come once recently. Entering a rouge shop. Was the Skinner demon a woman? Here, one sec. I'm going to send a text message. Shen Qingqiu blindly guessed for a while, sent Luo Binghe inside to ask a few questions, but there were no results. This sort of quest had been exclusively released for him so he could level up, so he had no scenes in the original work he could use as a reference. Shen Qingqiu also acknowledged he wasn't a master of deduction who could think meticulously, who could infer many things from a single clue. Previously, when playing room escape or detective games, he always dead-ended himself. Right as he was agonizing, the system thoughtfully notified, "We notice you have encountered difficulties. Would you like to spend 100 B points and activate easy mode?" Shen Qingqiu, "Shit, there was something like easy mode? Say that earlier! Activate, activate, activate!" He fixed his gaze on the yes option for 3 seconds. The option became green, then disappeared. Then something in the air caused goosebumps to erupt all over his back. Such thick, thick demonic energy! As if they were afraid people couldn't find the target. Calling it easy mode was no lie. Shen Qingqiu wasn't the least bit ashamed about using easy mode, and with soaring spirits walked in the direction the demonic energy was sprawling. After 500 steps, they gradually left the central district and arrived before an abandoned, neglected house. It can only be here. Look at those ghastly white paper lanterns, those dilapidated gates. A proper haunted house, don't you see? Shen Qingqiu adjusted his expression and urged Luo Binghe, who'd been silently following behind him, return to Chen Manor and notify Mingfan to bring all the disciples and talismans and come here. Luo Binghe had yet to utter a response when his pupils suddenly contracted. Shen Qingqiu saw he was staring straight at something behind him and knew things weren't good. However, it was too late after all, and a gust of ill wind blew past, the gates slamming open. "Shizun! Shizun, wake up, quickly!" Shen Qingqiu woke up. After waking, he saw Luo Binghe with a distressed expression, arms and torso bound opposite him. When he saw Shen Qingqiu awaken, he seemed to heave a sigh of relief, eyes brightening, and called Shizun again. And Ning Yingying was tied together with him, also calling with a miserable expression, "Shizun." Shen Qingqiu was a little dizzy, and also had no idea if whatever crap the demon sprayed had residual effects. He was in a foul mood. This easy mode really was straightforwardly merciless. It had delivered him straight into the boss's mouth. The worst part was, the dignified Qingqiu Peak Lord had been unexpectedly struck down by a small boss, and so a short while after he woke up, the system shrilly notified, "Out of character, B points minus 50. He'd just spent 100 B points to activate easy mode, and now in a flash he'd deducted another 50. How could he not be distressed? Originally, with the original Shen Qingqiu's skills at facing demons, it should have been like killing a chicken with a knife. Shamefully, the knife had failed to kill the chicken. But very soon he discovered something that had made his mood worse. His body seemed a little strange. It felt chilly and there was a slight pain. Upon lowering his head, he couldn't stop a fuck from leaving his mouth. He'd been stripped naked! That is Chapter 6. What a delightful place for that to end. I love it. Chapter 7, Backstabbing the Male Lead, Number 1. Though only his upper half had been stripped naked, it was horrifying enough. No matter what, Shen Qingqiu was a peak lord. This appearance with his upper half stark naked, wearing only a pair of pants and white shoes, his 4 limbs bound tightly with a thin rope as he lay topple on the floor. What was this? He looked exactly like a tender pretty boy caught in bed during an illicit act. No wonder the system had deducted 50 points straight off. It was deserved. Even a deduction to 0 would serve him right. Shen Qingqiu's face switched between red and white. He wanted to dig a hole in the ground with his sword and bury himself for a while, but his sword had disappeared without a trace. No wonder Luo Binghe just then looked both worried and a little embarrassed. He was definitely thinking that since he'd seen Shen Qingqiu in such a sorry state, once they got back, he'd inevitably be given vicious retaliation again. Ning Ying said, sobbing, "Shizun, you finally woke up! Ying is so scared!" Scared? If you're scared, then don't run about as you please, young lady. Shen Qingqiu gave up. At this time, from behind him came an unsettling chuckle. A long, dark silhouette emerged from pitch blackness. What Kangchong Mountain? What Qingjing Peaks, Lord? This was all you were. If Kangchong Mountain boasted to be the #1 sect in the world, is all full of this sort. The day the demon race subjugates the human realm is just around the corner. After speaking, there was another bout of crazy laughter. The other's head and face was covered with a black veil, its voice hoarse and unpleasant, as if its throat had been ruined by opium smoke. Shen Qingqiu squinted. The Skinner Demon. That's right, that's me. I'm the Skinner Demon. For the illustrious Zhuya sword to have fallen into my hands today. How joyous! Shen Qingqiu, Shen Qingqiu. Even if you guess until your wits give out, you won't be able to guess my identity. Why wouldn't I be able to guess? ... You're Dier, aren't you? The Skinner Demon lifted the veil, saying irritably, Impossible! How did you guess? Shen Qingqiu was speechless. You think I'm blind? That I can't tell from your figure? At first glance, rather than faces, men love looking at bodies. The curvy top and bottom, the tiny waist in between. It was definitely a woman. Also, those nouveau riche style furnishings can't be found anywhere. You think I don't know that we've been transported back to Chen Manor? Chen Manor may have many women, but I've only seen a couple and was only introduced to Dier. If you want me to guess, of course I can only guess Dier. I don't even know anyone else's names. How can I guess them? Who knew you'd lose your cool so easily? Didn't deny it even a little and jumped right to lifting your veil. Could he say this? Could he? Tell him, how could he say this out loud? He only swallowed it all down. Dier, or should be said, the Skinner Demon, quickly adjusted itself and donned the face of old Master Chen's beloved concubine, retrieving once more that infinitely tender, stunning, yet gleeful smile. Not bad. It was indeed me. Shen Qingqiu, even if you guess until your wits give out, you can't understand why it was a weak and delicate woman like me, right? Shen Qingqiu straightened his body, struggling to change his posture into one that was more natural, less rule-violating. Bosses traditionally had a time when they would confess. He couldn't not give this courtesy. Dier didn't need his encouragement and continued by itself. That the Skinner Demon vanishes without a trace isn't because I fly through the skies or disappear into the earth, but rather because every time I finish killing a person, I change into a new skin. By wearing these women's skins and imitating their behavior, I can blend into the crowd without anyone the wiser and search for my next target. Shen Qingqiu said, That's not right. Dier's expression darkened. What's not right? Shen Qingqiu said, Suppose every time you killed a person you changed skins. For instance, when you killed Dier and occupied her skin, you became Dier. But there's still Dier's skinned corpse. Wouldn't someone find it strange there are two Diers? After thinking about it a while, everything became clear again. It's not like this world had DNA. After skinning, what was left would be a messy lump of bloody flesh. Difficult to tell who it was. Dier said, Looks like you understand, too. Not bad. I used the current woman's corpse to substitute for the last woman's. For example, when I killed Dier, I was wearing Zhang Er's skin, so everyone at the time thought Zhang Er was still alive. And after I donned Dier's skin instead, Dier's corpse was disguised by me to look like Zhang Er's, then found by the others. Shen Qingqiu was truly impressed with these villains. Having so much professional integrity, not only did they need to expose their inner thoughts and feelings, they also needed to explain in detail their methods and line of reasoning when committing the crime, raising examples, giving personal experiences. They really were more responsible and thorough than a cram school teacher for college entrance exams. Luo Binghe had been silently listening the entire time, his eyes glittering and carrying a trace of anger, his juvenile sense of justice stirred up by this sick-minded demon's cruel actions. Ning Yingying's head was spinning from all the zangs and dies. She couldn't understand it all, but didn't dare interrupt. Shen Qingqiu said, After a certain amount of time, you always change skins. Is this on a whim, or because you have to? Dier sneered and said, You think I'd tell you. You've already told me plenty, all right, sis. What's one more? Dier walked towards where Ning Yingying and Luo Binghe were found. Luo Binghe remained calm. Ning Yingying screamed, Demon! Don't come over! Shizun, save me! Dier chuckled and said, Your Shizun has been bound with my immortal binding cable. His entire body's spiritual energy is incapable of flowing. He'd have difficulty protecting himself. How can he save you? No wonder, up to now, Shen Qingqiu had been secretly exerting himself, but his spiritual power felt like it was obstructed, and lacked that plentiful sensation from the past. Dier had re-entered monologue mode. If it weren't for my qi circulation being damaged, why would I need to do this, constantly changing skins and absorbing human qi? Your brat, your skin is lustrous and tender, and you're a disciple from a prestigious sect. I estimate you can be used for a good amount of time. After I suck your skin dry, it'll be your master's turn. The Zhu Ya sword can be used by me. His life can be considered not in vain. What did you just say? You think I'd tell you, right? Now not only have you told me, you've said something incredible and exposed your future plans as well! The professional quality of this world's villains were beyond help. Shen Qingqiu shamelessly communicated to the system. If a mistake happens during the quest and I end up dead, am I given a chance to reload and try again? The system said, An indestructible body is the protagonist's special privilege. Good thing villains always had the excellent quality of must answer all questions. Shen Qingqiu wanted to stall for time and needed only to toss a question at Dier. Haven't you always only targeted young and beautiful girls? I've never said I only pick young and beautiful women as targets. As long as they're good-looking, their skin fine and smooth, I'll target anyone. It's just that most of the time, men's skins are not as good as women's, and the skin of the elderly not as good as the youthful. As expected, Dier chattered on, then suddenly its eyes became green with envy, its expression changing into one of yearning, and it started to run its hands, painted with scarlet nail polish, over Shen Qingqiu's upper body. However, those who've cultivated before really are different. Even though you're a man, your skin is glossy and smooth. It's been so long since I've returned to using a man's skin. Being felt up by its hands, Shen Qingqiu broke out in goosebumps, yet still needed to give off an attitude of being spotless and untouchable. Part of him was disgusted, another part sympathetic. Thinking about it, the demon was a bit pitiful. It looked like it was originally male, but because of his martial training, he kept having to use women's skins. After such a long time, perhaps his mind had become twisted. Despite that, in the end, it was wearing the infinitely lovely face of a concubine. Being felt up like this, Shen Qingqiu inevitably became embarrassed and involuntarily shrank back a little. This appearance of his, in Luo Binghe's eyes, must have made an extraordinarily large impact. In the past, all he'd seen of Shen Qingqiu was an aloof and remote attitude, a derisive expression, yet at the time, he could see a faint, uncontrollable red flush form on that face, the way those eyes darted away. Plus, Shen Qingqiu's upper body was completely bare, other than the thin yet unbreakable immortal binding cable, and the red marks it left. There was only his long, scattered, jet-black hair, which failed to conceal anything. Luo Binghe's chest was bursting with a hard-to-describe, convoluted emotion. If you let Shen Qingqiu find an analogy for this emotion, it was like watching a beautiful romance movie, only to discover at the end the protagonist was that English teacher who'd always picked on him to answer questions, and if he couldn't answer, would give his palm 300 lashes. It both shattered his worldviews and injured him. Shen Qingqiu suddenly grinned. Dier said, wary, "Why are you smiling?" Shen Qingqiu slowly and deliberately said, "I'm amused at you, your poor judgment. There are 3 people here, yet out of everyone, you keep overlooking the most suitable to be your vessel." Upon hearing those words, Luo Binghe's face went pale. He could never have imagined he'd be randomly thrown to the wolves. Shen Qingqiu wasn't speaking thoughtlessly. Who was Luo Binghe? His true identity was a descendant of ancient demons. Legend said they were denizens of the heavens who'd fallen into depravity and become demons, so they were called heavenly demons for short. As the future princes of demon kind, their bloodline was first class. If an ordinary demon could obtain their body, forget repairing damaged chi circulation. Was there anything it couldn't do? Bye, Phil. Thanks for joining us. Dier looked Luo Binghe up and down. The latter strived to appear calm, but inside he was panicking and completely at a loss. Even if he thought until his wits gave out, he couldn't understand why the focus had turned to him. Dier said, "Even if you want to trick me, you need a better lie. The brat's appearance and aptitude may be exemplary, and he's fresh and tender, but how can he compare to you, who's in the mid-core formation stage?" Shen Qingqiu said while smiling, "With your level of insight, no wonder your martial training was unsuccessful. Why don't you think about it? As Shen Qingqiu, what kind of person am I? If this child only possessed an excellent aptitude and appearance, why would I accept him as my disciple? If I only wanted a disciple with excellent aptitude, every year among the people fighting to enter Kangchong Mountain Sect, I could have enough talent to pick and choose from. Naturally, our secrets wouldn't be known to outsiders." Dier immediately wavered. Excellent. This villain's IQ was ridiculously low and so easy to trick. An explanation like this had been conjured on the spot and was so full of holes he could actually manage to half believe it. Shen Qingqiu struck while the iron was hot. "If you're suspicious, there's an easy solution. I'll tell you a method that can verify my words. Go over there, aim a strike at the crown of his head. You'll know whether I'm lying or not." At the moment, Luo Binghe's face became ghastly white. No matter how mature, right now he was still a child. Even if grown men were facing their deaths, very few would be unaffected, let alone he was only 14 years old. Shen Qingqiu tried very hard not to look at him, and desperately apologized in his heart over and over again. "Binghe, you're a man of virtue. Please magnanimously forgive my smack-talking and backstabbing this time, okay? I'll never do it again. I'll definitely make it up to you in the future." Ning Ying Ying was scared witless. Shizun, you can't be serious." Shen Qingqiu was on tenterhooks and had no mind to comfort her. He only smiled at Dier and said, "Whether I'm not I'm telling the truth, you'll know as soon as you try. What, it's only giving an insignificant boy a single strike. Even if I was lying to you, you wouldn't lose anything, would you? Or are you worried I'm telling the truth, so you dare not hit him?" In the eyes of a person who didn't know the truth, this was undoubtedly pushing Luo Binghe to his death. Luo Binghe was in disbelief. He blankly thought, had Shen Qingqiu's hatred for him truly reached such a degree? If that was the case, why was he a little nicer to him on the way here? He couldn't help but start struggling with all his might. The ropes restraining his body became tighter and tighter, biting painfully into Ning Ying Ying, but she didn't even dare breathe aloud, just quietly sobbed. Shen Qingqiu's words and tone were incredibly persuasive. Dier thought for a while. That's true. It had already killed so many people. How could it be afraid of giving a single strike? It snorted and said, "I want to see what exactly sort of fool thing you're pulling." As it said this, it strode towards Luo Binghe and brought its palm down. Dun dun dun! Chapter 8. Giving sweets after backstabbing. The chance was only an instant. Shen Qingqiu's pupils contracted. Right as the strike came down, a In a curious coincidence, a ceiling beam broke. If Shen Qingqiu had still been a reader of Proud Immortal Demon Way, upon seeing this, he would definitely have thrown down his cell phone and started screaming curses. The system had already declared the unbreakable, ironclad rule was that the protagonist could not die, which also meant as soon as the protagonist's life was threatened, a death flag would be triggered. Shen Qingqiu purposefully goaded Dier into attacking Luo Binghe, for the sake of taking advantage of this rule, using someone else to do his dirty work. Even though this was rather unjust, but Luo Binghe likely wouldn't have been in any danger, and if he hadn't done this and failed to do a good job, Shen Qingqiu would have had to directly pay the price himself. Taking the long-term view, even if he threw Luo Binghe under the bus this one time, there would still be an opportunity to farm favor in the future. However, Great Master, airplane shooting towards the sky, how do you see your readers' IQs? In a perfectly fine, splendid, and beautiful new mansion, how could a ceiling beam suddenly snap? Even if it was to let the protagonist escape with his life, this twist was too contrived. What was the difference between this and a third-rate dog blood drama where the male and female leads were about to marry, then were hit by a car and a forced bad end? Thumbs down! That pretty much brand new ceiling beam fell straight down and just happened to coincidentally smash into Dier, smacking it flat into the ground, unable to get up. And the beam also coincidentally smashed into the pillar Luo Binghe and Ning Yingying were bound to, causing it to slant. Ning Yingying had already fainted from shock. After struggling for a while, Luo Binghe's ropes also coincidentally loosened. After this series of coincidences, Shen Qingqiu, tied up on the ground by the immortal binding cables, watched as Luo Binghe froze next to the fallen Dier and entered a puzzling silence. Was this it? Just as he'd thought this, Dier overturned the ceiling beam and sprang up. Enraged, it said, "Shen Qingqiu! Those from Kangchong Mountains truly are shameless and despicable, full of schemes. Just now, what sort of dirty trick did you use to ambush me from behind like that?" Shen Qingqiu was truly completely innocent. Nothing to do with him, really. The chief culprit should be Luo Binghe. Dier was unforgiving and said, "So you really were purposefully lying to me, trying to draw my attention away so you could sneak attack me. Otherwise, why would a perfectly good ceiling beam come crashing down and just happen to smash into me?" It also had the wits to notice parts of this scene that were illogical. Its IQ wasn't beyond saving. Shen Qingqiu was a little relieved. Dier sneered and said, "You thought this was enough to stop me? Keep dreaming. The immortal binding cables can only be cut by an immortal sword. Forget about breaking through it in normal methods." "I just praised you, and you goofed again. Don't reveal how to free the enemy. Also, are you afraid I can't see where you put my sword? You even specially drew back your cloak to show its place on your hip, and you patted it." Shen Qingqiu couldn't contain his agitation and took a chance to communicate with the system. "I need to ask, do all villains follow this mold?" The system said. "To guarantee you can smoothly clear the introductory level quest, after activating easy mode, the villain's IQ was set to below average." So not all bosses were this easy to fumble through. Shen Qingqiu thought it was a bit of a pity, but still smashed the like button. "This easy mode of yours is really user-friendly. Thumbs up." Dier gritted his teeth. "I won't listen to you no matter what you say this time. Accept your death, Shen Qingqiu." Shen Qingqiu shouted, "One last thing." Sure enough, under the power of easy mode, Dier stopped. "What last words do you still have?" Shen Qingqiu thought for a while, then asked, "How does it feel to sleep with a 60-year-old coot?" Dier was so enraged, its expression twisted. Its entire body started to tremble. Taking this chance, Luo Binghe suddenly rushed from behind. He snatched Zuya from Dier's hip and drew the sword, purifying the entire room with white light. A curved flash of silver, and the immortal binding cable on Shen Qingqiu's body was neatly severed. One could only blame this small boss Dier's IQ for being below average in easy mode. A living, breathing Luo Binghe had been standing right behind it, and he'd completely ignored its existence. Dier cried out in fear, "This is impossible!" "Enough. I'm not the listening type. I don't want to hear a perfunctory analysis of the boss's motives right before its death." The corner of Shen Qingqiu's mouth twitched, and he gathered all his spiritual power into his right hand, sending out a palm striking, smacking Dier in the chest. The latter immediately flew back like a kite with its string snapped. This was Shen Qingqiu's first time killing someone, but he didn't hold back even a little. First, because this was a book. Second, this was a demon who'd killed countless people. Third, because if he didn't, he'd be the one dead. Shen Qingqiu glanced at Dier's horrible state. 4 limbs twisted and broken, bleeding from the chichao? I'm probably not saying this word right, but it's a term that means the orifices of the face, so bleeding from the ears and the nose and the mouth. And turned its head, bombarding its brain with a barrage of the above 3 reasons. Striving to remain calm, he slowly stood and straightened, settled his heart and breathing, fixed his posture, and turned to Luo Binghe. This was your first time seeing someone eliminate demons and uphold justice. Were you scared? Luo Binghe's still childish face turned slightly pale. Shen Qingqiu said, composed, "If you wish to uphold, you must eliminate." Luo Binghe gritted his teeth, saying in a quavering voice, "Shizun, if this disciple may be so bold to ask just now." When the second half of the sentence didn't arrive, Shen Qingqiu said, "You want to ask if just now that ceiling beam hadn't suddenly come crashing down, what this master's plan was?" Shen Qingqiu had no choice but to suffer in silence. He really wanted to tell Luo Binghe, "Don't worry, even if the beam hadn't collapsed, perhaps the wall would have. If the wall hadn't, perhaps the pillar would have. Long story short, you definitely wouldn't have died, the boss definitely would have. That's all." These words were incredibly difficult to say, so we could only play at being unpredictable and evade the question by changing the subject. "To ask this, are you blaming this master?" Luo Binghe shook his head and said with a sincere expression, "No, if this disciple can give up his life for Shizun, it would be an honor." Shen Qingqiu was shaken by how much of a white lotus he was. "Hello, Iria, thanks for joining us." Shen Qingqiu thought for a while, first choosing a more ambiguous wording. "Then this master will also tell you, even if an accident befalls this master, no mishap will happen to you." This was an absolute truth. Even if Shen Qingqiu died 100 times, Luo Binghe, as the protagonist with an indestructible body, would go on living perfectly well. His expression was confident and collected, without the slightest appearance of falsity, voice resounding as he said, "About this, I absolutely am not lying." Upon Luo Binghe hearing these words, it was as if his vitality had been ignited. The sunflower that had been slightly listless became full of vigor again. Holding the sword in both hands, he lifted it until it was even with his brows, presenting it to Shen Qingqiu. "Shizun, your sword!" Shen Qingqiu grasped it, taking it from him. Internally, he wiped at his sweat. Currently, this child was so easy to dupe. Just now, he'd been thrown under the bus, frightened out of his wits, yet in a blink, had been revived and restored to full health with only a couple of words. But in the future, he wouldn't be so easy to fool. The path of growing up was truly filled with thorns and suffering. Next came system notifications like a series of cannon blasts, putting him on cloud 9. Ning Ying Ying's favor has increased. Protagonist satisfaction points plus 50. Obtained high-level object, immortal binding cable. Villain strength plus 30. Completed the introductory level quest, B points plus 200. Out of character feature, unfrozen. From this point on, you have full command over the Shen Qingqiu account's controls. Congratulations! Please continue to work hard. Shen Qingqiu had fallen a little in love with this gambling-like sensation, with the dramatic ups and downs, the intense joys and sorrows. The out-of-character feature was already unfrozen. From this point on, he could finally carry out the great and glorious task of clinging to the male lead's thighs. Upon returning to Kangchong Mountains, the first thing was to ascend Chongding Peak, safeguarded by the sect leader, and report to Yu Qingyuan about his work. Previously, Shen Qingqiu had always thought this Sangman Shixiang's existence was like a quest-giving NPC, but as soon as he entered the mountain gates, the feeling disappeared without a trace. He had yet to enter the main hall when Yu Qingyuan led the Chongding Peak disciples following behind him to welcome him. The two of them had just come face to face and smiled at each other, having yet to say anything, when Yu Qingyuan's right hand grasped Shen Qingqiu's pulse. Shen Qingqiu was instantly surprised. However, Yu Qingyuan made no further moves, and instead examined him attentively, inserting a weak spiritual flow. He then knew that Yu Qingyuan was only inspecting his body's spiritual circulation and became at ease. After a moment, Yu Qingyuan let go and, smiling, walked with Shen Qingqiu into the main hall. He asked, "How was the training?" His tone was like that of an elder brother, and made Shen Qingqiu remember his own 2 brothers. He felt a slight sorrow, but still greater was a sense of comforting warmth, to the point that even his dejected words came out joyful. Unsatisfactory. His disciples didn't even get to see the Skinner Demon's shadow. Speaking from the angle of training disciples, it truly was unsatisfactory. Yu Qingyuan said, "No need to rush." Shen Qingqiu nodded, then suddenly changed the topic. "Zhengman Shishang, I want to go to Chongding Peak's back area and enter secluded cultivation within the Lingxi Caves." Chongding Peak was the head of the 12 peaks, and naturally could collect the world's essence. And as for the Lingxi Caves, it was Chongding Peak's best location for cultivating, giving twice the results in half the time. Therefore, the sect's most senior members, or outstanding disciples, could request the sect leader to enter the cave for secluded cultivation. Only with the sect leader's approval could the request be acted upon. If Shen Qingqiu wanted to enter seclusion in the Lingxi Caves, of course Yu Qingyuan wouldn't refuse, but the smile on his lips froze a little, his expression changing slightly. Shen Qingqiu sensed something was strange, but the strangeness flashed by, and Yu Qingyuan was once again gently asking him, "For the Immortal Alliance Conference?" Shen Qingqiu said, "That's correct." It wasn't only because of the Immortal Alliance Conference. This incident with the Skinner Demon made Shen Qingqiu understand more the importance of honestly cultivating. In this world, only if you have strength do you have the right to think about the future. After all, bosses wouldn't always be on easy mode with below-average intelligence. Before entering seclusion, Shen Qingqiu called Luo Binghe over and handed him the correct cultivation manual. Luo Binghe received it and asked, "Why is Shizun giving this disciple a completely different manual?" Shen Qingqiu solemnly bullshitted. "Your constitution is a little different, so you can't cultivate by following ordinary methods." He didn't want to personally reveal the truth that Shen Qingqiu had incited Mingfan to give Luo Binghe a fake cultivation manual, even though eventually it would all be exposed. Staring after Shen Qingqiu's retreating back, Luo Binghe held the manual in both hands, his heart incredibly shaken. This was the manual Shen Shizun had specially given only to him. Shen Qingqiu glanced back occasionally and saw him still standing dumbly there. He rubbed at the spot between his brows and kept walking. Even though he didn't know what Luo Binghe was thinking, he was probably thinking too much. Thank you, Aria. I'm really glad you like my videos. And hello, Hakate. Welcome. I think we'll go a little further. These chapters are pretty short, so I think we can do one more. Because then I think if we do that, we'll be through. Next time we should read about the fight and we'll be caught up with the TV show. So that next week when we watch the TV show, we'll be watching what we've read. Chapter 9, Baizan Peak Lord. Lingxi Caves was labyrinthine, with thousands of twists and turns, like its entrance led to a world from an alien universe altogether. There was neither wind nor moon, yet it was cool and quiet. With white stones like clouds and green stones like jade, together they created the many wondrous yet natural stone beds. In the center was a pool of clear water like a mirror, reflecting a different world. The one thing marring the beauty was that some senior who'd previously secluded themselves here didn't know to cherish this public facility. The cave walls were covered in countless gashes and gouges made by both blade and sword glares. Stone walls were plastered with swaths of dried blood, the stains already blackened. This was only one cavern of many, and though it looked a little like a murder scene, Shen Qingqiu was very satisfied and didn't intend to find another location. He sat on the stone bed and began to cultivate, carefully following the methods he'd memorized from the manuals. Then, as if the heavens didn't want him to try honestly farming bee points, he heard a strange sound. Panting. Someone's labored panting. At the same time, he sensed a burst of almost rampant spiritual energy. All right, Shen Qingqiu knew what had happened. Lingxi Caves was gigantic. Of course he wouldn't be the only person who'd applied for seclusion here. There was someone else here cultivating as well, and had entered Qi deviation, currently at a critical juncture. I only wanted to cultivate in seclusion and level up martially, that's all. Can this not happen? Can this not? Shen Qingqiu quickly opened his eyes and decided to investigate. He followed the sound and the waves of spiritual energy passing through the various twists and turns. The disturbances became larger and larger. At last he arrived in another cavern. As soon as he entered, he saw a figure clothed in white facing away from him. A long sword was stabbed into rock all the way to the hilt. Sword glares flew in every direction without any order or pattern. The smears of blood on the person in white made him seem like a victim, but his movements made him seem like a crazed murderer. This person's chi deviation was pretty horrifying. Shen Qingqiu molded over. With his half-assed knowledge, if he went to smooth the person's spiritual circulation, it was hard to say whether he'd be more likely to help or cause further damage. It was then he caught sight of the sword. With its master's spiritual energy now out of control, the sword tremored unceasingly, pulling itself free inch by inch, all while emitting an ear-piercing shriek. Silver light ran down the hilt's engraved incantations and paired phoenix ornamentation, streaming without pause. Shen Qingqiu only needed a single glance to recognize which sword it was. Whose sword it was. Fuck. Of all people, he had to meet this guy. If before he'd still wanted to help, now all he wanted to do was flee for his life. But it was already too late. The person in white swung his head around, having already detected his presence. Shen Qingqiu was in no mood to praise. What a beautiful man! No matter how beautiful the man, if he glared at you with crimson eyes and bulging veins, you'd scramble to kneel, okay? He ran with a flick of his sleeves, but the man slapped the stone wall and sent rubble flying. The long sword, finally free of the cracked rock, soared through the air to stop before Shen Qingqiu's eyes, blocking his path. He barely managed to break in time. Had he been running a little faster, he would have been beheaded. Next instant, the white-clad man rushed him, devoid of reason. Shen Qingqiu knew it was too late to run and could only steel himself to fight head-on. He drew spiritual energy into his right hand. Staking everything, he struck at the person's chest. If this person really was how the rumors painted him, with martial prowess on par with the protagonist, the hit would be damn useless. Not only damn useless, it might even send Shen Qingqiu flying 10 meters back, coughing up a mouth of fresh blood or something. However, it wasn't useless, and the one sent flying 3 feet back while coughing up blood was not Shen Qingqiu, but the other party. At that moment, Shen Qingqiu raised his right hand while looking at the person he'd knocked flat, and thought, even without acting cool, he was already awesome! In truth, even those who entered tripping over my words now. Those who entered chi deviation were terrifying when berserk. They were also very fragile. Supported by a single thread, a single lucky strike could crumple them completely. With a conflicted expression, Shen Qingqiu watched the person half kneel in pain, straining to rise and rip into him, only to collapse back onto one knee, and at last he sighed and moved closer, placing a hand on the other's back. I'll say this first. Shen Qingqiu didn't concern himself with whether the other could understand him, saying for himself, if I don't save you now, it'll be too late. I'm not familiar with how this works, so, anyhow, I'll try my best. Don't blame me. After who knows how long, Shen Qingqiu felt the other's spiritual circulation gradually even out and return to normal. He slowly stopped worrying and withdrew his palm. All that remained was to pray that his slapdash, desperate attempt at helping hadn't hurt the other's cultivation. The one he'd magically managed to save only stayed with his head lowered, still not conscious. To be honest, Shen Qingqiu had already guessed the person's identity, but the system's notification gave absolute confirmation. Congratulations! System notification. The scene, Luo Binghe, this is the first time saying this word out loud, give me a sec. Luo Binghe's, Qingqiu? I think it's Qingqiu. Luo Binghe's death has been changed. The villain Shen Qingqiu's grave digging and hatefulness ratings have decreased, plus 200 B points. As expected, this was his shidi from the same sect, also a sucker done in by the original Shen Qingqiu. Kangqiang Mountain's 12 Peaks Baizen Master, Luo Binghe. Luo Binghe was a character who personified awesomeness. The 12 peaks of Kangqiang Mountain each had their own long histories and distinctive characteristics. For example, the head Qiangding Peak coordinated the big picture and oversaw the entire group. Shen Qingqiu's Qingjing Peak was the favorite of scholars and young artists. Wanjian Peak, with the perfect environment, had produced legions of master swordsmen since time immemorial. Kuxing's Peak name spoke for itself. Even if you whipped Shen Qingqiu, he still wouldn't want to go. That is apparently a joke. What is the aesthetic practice? So apparently monks, I guess. So he wouldn't want to be a monk. Jianzhu Peak was a drool-worthy existence. That's because this last peak only accepted female disciples with strict standards for disciples' attractiveness, and so was filled to the brim with beautiful girls. There'd been no shortage of self-indulgent, racy fan works, mass-blossoming freely, all written by perverted readers. Of these, a tyrannical Shanzhu fell in love with me. My days sleeping around in Shanzhu Peak had been particularly outstanding, filled with grade school level writing and erotic scenes with no bottom line. Their circulation and impact had been enormous, to the point they wouldn't lose to the original work. But out of all the peaks, the ones youths loved most, revered the most, were the wildest about entering, was definitely Liu Qingge's Baizan Peak. This was the most militant of Kangchong Mountain's branches, as well as the branch with the greatest martial ability. Of the successive generations of Baizan Peak lords, every single one had been a world-class swordsmaster, a victor of countless battles, an undefeated legend. How hot-blooded, badass! Male readers always fervently admire the strong. Even though Luo Binghe had never officially debuted, he didn't lack for fans, and Shen Yuan had been especially fascinated with him. In his headcanon, Luo Binghe had been a sharp-looking, manly man, powerful and magnificent, a war god. Shen Qingqiu looked down at that face, beautiful like a fine woman's, and his dreams shattered and died. The fantasies he'd always held, destroyed. The invincible Baizan Peak Lord. What's with this complete mismatch? This was clearly the face of a youthful young master who arranged flowers and plucked willows. With this sort of appearance, you've totally failed the headcanons of the power-level-loving fan base of yours. But thinking about it, it made sense. Liu Qingge was the older brother of the #1 true female lead, the peerless beauty Liu Mingyan. As the protagonist's wife, her substance absolutely had to be first class. For her to have such powerful genes was scientific. Undefeatable in battle, an arrogant disposition, and an attractive face. With Binghe around, a second such character was unnecessary. No wonder Great Master Airplane had offed him so early. Not the protagonist, yet you dare have such qualities. Within seconds, you'd either be exceptional cannon fodder, or just dead. He hadn't considered it then, but thinking about it now, would saving this person's life affect Luo Binghe's satisfaction points? Few details existed on Liu Qingge, but he played a very important role, to display the depths of Shen Qingqiu's scumminess. Even though the Liu Shen pair were sect siblings, they didn't get along. This was the reason Shen Qingqiu tried to flee earlier. Already unable to see eye to eye normally, to throw one of them into chi deviation was to ask him to either chase down and hack Shen Qingqiu to death, or, like in the original work, have Shen Qingqiu cause his death instead. Though no one knew why their hatred ran so deep, the original Shen Qingqiu had been Liu Qingge's murderer. That was a sure fact. This incident being exposed was one of the things marking the start of Shen Qingqiu's downfall. The line they'd used when condemning Shen Qingqiu had been, taking advantage of an opening during cultivation, he intervened, driving the other to his death. So, this was likely when he'd made the move. Shen Qingqiu had killed the female lead's only family, so of course Luo Binghe would take revenge for his wife. Shen Qingqiu's hatefulness really was extraordinary. While Shen Qingqiu was there worrying over his future, Liu Qingge had finally coughed up blood and regained consciousness. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw Shen Qingqiu sitting before him with a bored expression, looking down on him with a stuck-up manner. It definitely didn't look like someone with good intentions. Alarmed, he violently jerked upright to try and defend himself. The motion jarred his badly injured internal organs, throwing his chi circulation into chaos. Another mouthful of blood sprayed out. Shen Qingqiu coolly said, "Shidi, regulate your chi. Don't be so agitated. You're the Baizan Peak Lord. How can you let yourself look so wretched? Here, wipe yourself off." He passed him a handkerchief. Liu Qingge coughed up blood while saying, "Shen, what are you planning now?" Seeing how much he was suffering, Shen Qingqiu lightly clapped him on the back. Liu Qingge originally thought the other had wanted to harm him, but was helpless to avoid it. Only after the palm touched him did he feel a clear, steady stream of spiritual energy enter and flow through his body, helping to smooth his circulation. Liu Qingge was more aghast than if Shen Qingqiu had backstabbed him. After all, he was used to the backstabbing. Shen Qingqiu continued to pat his back while saying earnestly, "Liu Shidi, to tell the truth, lately Shishang has been in seclusion and come to realize many things. Seeing you at death's door, a flower fading, dying so young, It brought back a lot of memories. Shishong is deeply ashamed and filled with regret. Liu Qingqiu seemed to hack up even more blood. Shen Qingqiu tactfully expressed his goodwill. How about you and I, from here on out, leave behind our disagreements and move forward hand in hand as a pair of model sect siblings, full of affection between fellow sect members. How do you feel about this, Shidi? Saying it so straightforwardly was a little shameful, but since he already didn't kill Liu Qingqiu, having changed the scene and its evil karma, why not go all the way and build a good relationship? Maybe Master Liu could even become his backup. Liu Qingqiu's complexion was abnormally poor. He looked Shen Qingqiu in the eyes for a while, then as if he'd finally reached the limits of his tolerance, said, "You, go further away." Shen Qingqiu expressed his understanding. After all, they'd hated each other for so long. Good feelings couldn't be fostered in a short amount of time. He couldn't rush this sort of thing, only take it slow. He nodded and went as asked, waving behind him without looking back as he walked. If Shidi runs into more trouble during training, there's no need to be shy. You can call Shishong over for help. Since we're so close, we should take care of each other. Liu Qingqiu looked like he'd cough up blood again if Shen Qingqiu spoke anymore. His glare was terrifying. Shen Qingqiu wisely shut his mouth and went further away. Liu Qingqiu was left alone and painfully hacked up another mouth of blood. They'd always been at odds. Ever since he was young, Liu Qingqiu could never stand Shen Qingqiu. Both parties deeply despised each other. This type of vitriol wasn't the type you'd see when a belligerent but happy couple fought and argued. It was the type where both parties couldn't last a single sentence without escalating into violence, to the point of trying to kill each other. The fact that Shen Qingqiu hadn't kicked him while he was down was already inconceivable, but to even help save him? But reality was right before him. Liu Qingqiu's face couldn't help twisting. He only remembered up to the moment he lost control, but now his spiritual circulation was smooth. He couldn't have straightened it himself during his frenzy. There must have been outside assistance. Could it really be that Shen Qingqiu had helped him? Just thinking about the possibility filled Liu Qingqiu with revulsion. He'd rather have died. And now we're at chapter 10, and we'll call it there. Thank you all for joining me. This story's so much fun. I forgot how fun and witty it is. The show is a delight as well, but the inner dialogues and details that the novel goes into discussing the plot points and the goofs is just a delight. Thanks for joining me. Next week, we'll watch 2 episodes of the show, Scumbag System. I think we're on episodes 6 and 7. Coming close to the end, but that'll be fun. Today, I'm going to play something spooky. Haven't decided what yet. And then we're going to watch movies later. Quite On, the Ghost movie, and maybe something else. We'll see. If you like what I do and want to support it, check the links for ways to become a member or patron. And you can also purchase my books. You can follow me on social media, join the Discord to watch TV and hang out with us. All that jazz. I'm gonna go and have lunch, get ready for the next stream. I'll let y'all know what's happening, probably 4 o'clock. So I will see y'all then. Bye.